My son was explaining compound interest when my husband decided to erase 20 years of my life. That is not a sentence I ever expected to say. It was Sunday dinner. The good plates were out because all 3 children were home, and at our age that felt almost like a holiday. Erica had come with her husband Eric, and a store-bought peach cobbler she claimed was basically homemade because I drove it here with love. Brandon had come straight from his apartment downtown, still wearing his work shirt from the financial office where he had recently started. Simone was home from Ohio State with 2 laundry bags, 1 backpack, and the calm belief that food simply appeared in my refrigerator because the house loved her. I had made roast chicken, rice, green beans, and sweet potatoes. Nothing dramatic. Just dinner. Brandon was proud of himself because he had finally signed up for his company retirement plan. "I'm putting in 6%, he said. "They match 4. Malcolm pointed his fork at him. "Good. Never leave free money on the table." "I know, Dad. And raise it every time you get a raise." "I said I know." Malcolm smiled. "Everybody thinks retirement is far away until you're 57 and some young man from corporate is teaching you a system that makes you feel like you missed a whole language." Erica looked at me. "Dad knows how to make dinner light." "I was going to discuss blood pressure next," Malcolm said. Everybody laughed. I laughed too. That was the thing about Malcolm. Even after 28 years, even when he annoyed me, even when he could make the room smaller with 1 sentence, he could still be funny. He knew timing. He knew how to make our children roll their eyes and laugh at the same time. Brandon asked what Malcolm had contributed when he was 29. That led to a whole conversation about employer matches, retirement calculators, and the years when Malcolm and I were trying to save for college while keeping 3 children in clothes that fit for more than 6 weeks. Then Malcolm leaned back and said, "Your mother never had to worry about any of this." I looked at him. "About what?" "Retirement accounts, employer matches, all that." Erica frowned. "Why wouldn't Mom worry about it?" Malcolm smiled, like the answer was harmless. "Because your mother retired at 34. I laughed once because I thought he was joking. Nobody else laughed. Simone set her fork down. "Mom raised us. I know that." "And ran this whole house," Erica said. "I know that too." Brandon looked uncomfortable. Eric suddenly became very interested in his napkin. Malcolm lifted both hands. "Everybody relax. I'm not saying she didn't work around here." Around here. Those 2 words landed in my chest harder than they should have. Like I had spent 20 years floating from room to room, lighting candles and fluffing pillows. Then Malcolm chuckled. "Come on, Cassandra has had a pretty good deal." I turned toward him. "A good deal? You know what I mean." "No, tell me." He looked around the table. That was the moment he could have stopped. He could have laughed it off, apologized, changed the subject, asked Simone about school, anything. He did not. He looked right at me and said, "Cassandra, you've never earned $1 in your life." The room went quiet. Not quiet like people thinking, quiet like something had cracked. Simone's fork touched her plate with a tiny click. That is the sound I remember most. Not Malcolm's voice. Not Erica whispering, "Dad." Not Brandon's face closing up. That click. I stared at Malcolm. "I had a career." He sighed. I hated that sigh. The one that said I was dragging a joke into court. 20 years ago? I worked for almost 9 years before Simone was born. "I'm aware. You asked me to quit. Because we had 3 kids, Cass. Your new role had you traveling, my promotion had me traveling, and somebody had to be present. I know what happened." "Then why are we doing this?" Erica pushed her plate away. "Dad, just apologize." Malcolm's face changed. "For what? Everybody knows what I meant." I said, "Then say what you meant." He looked at me for a few seconds. I wish he had chosen better. He said, "I meant I carried the financial side of this family for 20 years. That's a fact." Nobody spoke. Then he added, "Everything we have came from the checks I brought home." That was worse than the first sentence. The first sentence could have been stupid. Cruel, but stupid. The second sentence was a belief. I looked around that dining room. The table had a little dent near Brandon's chair from the year he discovered that spoons could launch peas. The rug had survived spilled juice, birthday cake icing, one science project, and a dog we still do not discuss during meals. I knew which cabinet held Simone's old inhaler spacer. I knew Erica hated pecans, but forgot to mention it until the pie was already sliced. I knew when Malcolm's mother needed her next eye appointment. I knew the name of every teacher who had ever suggested one of my children just needed more structure, which is what teachers say when they have not yet met the parent with the spreadsheet. I had managed speech therapy, braces, school meetings, summer camps, emergency room visits, birthday parties, college applications, insurance calls, Malcolm's father's surgery, his mother's bills, 3 moves, 2 flooded basements, and every Christmas gift his siblings had received since 2004. Apparently, none of that came with a pay stub, so in Malcolm's mind, it had happened for free. I did not say any of that. Maybe I should have. The strange thing was that I was not as angry as I expected. I was embarrassed, not because he had said it in front of the children, because I had heard smaller versions of it for years. Cass is the lucky one. Cass doesn't have to deal with bosses. I make the money, she spends it. That one always got a laugh at cookouts. I had laughed too. Correcting him every time seemed small, exhausting, like I was the kind of woman who could not take a joke. But if you let someone tell the same joke long enough, one day he forgets it is a joke. Erica and Eric left first. At the front door, Erica hugged me and whispered, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She gave me the look grown daughters give their mothers when the lie is insulting to both of them. Brandon left 15 minutes later. He hugged his father, then me. "Good dinner, Mom." It sounded like an apology he did not know how to give. Simone went upstairs with her laundry and announced she was staying the night. She did not ask. Simone rarely asked when she was angry. Malcolm started loading the dishwasher. I watched him for a minute. Finally, he said, "So you're really going to be mad about this?" "I don't know yet. Cassandra, you said it in front of our children. It was a joke." The first part might have been. He shut the dishwasher harder than necessary. "You know what I meant." I looked at him. "That is what worries me." He went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the dishwasher and the dryer thumping above me with Simone's clothes. It sounded like someone was trying to kick out of the wall. After a while, I went upstairs too, not to bed, to our closet. We kept a small fireproof safe on the floor behind Malcolm's winter boots. Inside were passports, birth certificates, the deed, old tax documents, insurance papers, and several things neither of us had touched since our children were small enough to think a fax machine was modern. At the bottom was a tan legal envelope. My handwriting was on the front. Cassandra, keep. I sat on the closet carpet. I knew what was inside before I opened it. 20 years earlier, Malcolm had been offered a promotion, more money, better title, more travel. Simone was still a baby. Brandon had just started kindergarten. Erica needed speech therapy twice a week. I had just been offered a new senior role with the commercial design firm where I worked. That job would have required travel too. We were exhausted. One night, Malcolm sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I don't know how we keep doing this." Then he asked me to quit. I remember the exact sentence I said back to him. "You're asking me to bet my future on us." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Then let's make sure you're protected." That was how the agreement started. Not because I thought Malcolm would leave me. Not because I was planning an escape.
Because he did not want me to be afraid that staying home meant handing him the only key to our life. I pulled the pages out. His signature was on the last one. So was mine. The agreement did not punish him for being cruel at dinner. It was not magic. It did not start glowing because my husband acted like a fool over sweet potatoes. It mattered if our marriage ended or if he tried to leave me financially exposed after 2 decades out of the workforce. As I sat on the closet floor, I thought about the past couple of months. Malcolm had moved several investment accounts to a new advisor. He had mentioned selling the house 3 different times. Twice, he had asked what I thought I would really need every month after Simone finished school. At the time, I thought we were talking about retirement. Now, I was not sure we had been talking about the same future. I put the agreement back in the envelope. Then I changed my mind and carried it downstairs.
The next morning, Malcolm came into the kitchen at 7. The envelope sat beside his coffee cup. He stopped. Then he picked it up. What is this supposed to mean? I poured coffee into my mug. It means 20 years ago, at least one version of you remembered why I stopped getting paychecks. He opened the envelope. At first, he flipped through the pages fast, then slower. Then he went back to the first page and started again. His face changed, not dramatically, just enough. He pulled out his phone and photographed every page. Then he walked into his study and shut the door. 20 minutes later, I passed the hallway and heard him on the phone. "Darius, it's Malcolm Brooks." A pause. "No, I need to come in today." That was when I stopped thinking the worst thing that happened was what he said at dinner. Malcolm left before 8:30. He did not tell me where he was going. He did not have to. Darius Reed had been his lawyer for years. Estate documents, a small ownership matter at Malcolm's company, some contract dispute I barely remembered. Darius was the kind of lawyer who wore expensive suits in a way that made you know he did not buy them on sale. Malcolm came home a little after noon. He placed his keys on the counter and stood there like he had forgotten what room he was in. I was making a turkey sandwich. "How did it go?" He looked at me. "You knew where I went." "I heard you call him." He opened the refrigerator, stared into it, and closed it without taking anything. "Darius says this thing may still matter." "This thing?" "You know what I mean." "I do, I just was not sure you did." He rubbed his forehead. "Can we not do this?" "Do what?" "Turn every sentence into a knife." I put the mustard back in the refrigerator. "I am not the one who started keeping score." That shut him up for a few seconds. Then he sat at the table. I had known Malcolm for more than half my life. I knew his moods. Angry Malcolm. Tired Malcolm. Embarrassed Malcolm. Malcolm trying not to look worried. This was worried Malcolm. "What did Darius actually say?" He leaned back. "He asked whether you had your own attorney when we signed it." "I did." "I know." "Do you?" He ignored that. He asked if we both disclosed our finances. He asked whether you quit after signing. He asked how long you stayed out of the workforce. He asked whether we ever signed anything later that replaced it. "And?" Malcolm looked annoyed, but not fully at me. He said I should not treat it like some old piece of paper that cannot matter. That gave me less pleasure than you might think. I had wanted a clean moment. I wanted Malcolm to walk in and say he was wrong, the agreement was real, and he had been cruel. Instead, he looked like a man who had just learned the bridge he had been driving across for 20 years had cracks in it. "Is it enforceable?" He didn't say. "That is comforting." He said parts may be, parts may not. 20 years is a long time. Circumstances changed. He is right about that. Malcolm glanced at me. Then he said, he also mentioned old correspondence from when it was drafted. Emails, letters, revisions. His office is looking for whatever they still have. At the time, that part slid past me. All I heard was that the agreement was not worthless, which meant Malcolm had a reason to be nervous. And once I realized that, another thought followed. Why was he nervous at all? If our marriage was fine, if Sunday dinner had really been one bad joke, what exactly was he afraid the agreement could do? I asked him. He stood. "I am not afraid." "Then why did you call a lawyer before breakfast?" He turned toward me. "Yes, because you put a 20-year-old marital agreement next to my coffee like a threat. I put it there because you told our children my adult life had no financial value." "That is not what I said." "It is very close to what you said." "What I said was that I carried the income." "You said everything we have came from your checks." "It did." There it was again. I wish I could tell you I stayed calm. I did not. I laughed. Not because it was funny. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when anger has nowhere polite left to stand. "Do you hear yourself?" "Oh, come on." "No, do you hear yourself?" I worked 60-hour weeks. I know. I traveled constantly. I know. I was the one lying awake wondering how to pay the mortgage and save for college. I know, Malcolm. He stopped. Maybe he expected me to deny it. I did not. There were years when the pressure on Malcolm was enormous. In 2009, he looked 10 years older than he had 2 years before. I remember him checking email in bed before sunrise. I remember the silence when bonuses disappeared. I remember him sitting in the car in the driveway for 10 minutes before coming inside because he needed to become calm enough to be a father. His work mattered. His fear mattered. But somewhere along the way, his sacrifices had become proof that he had done everything. And my knowing his sacrifices had somehow become permission for him to forget mine. 20 years earlier, we did not talk that way. Back then, the decision for me to quit felt painful, but practical. Malcolm's promotion came with better money and constant travel. Erica needed speech therapy. Brandon had just started school. Simone was still in diapers. Daycare for 3 children would have eaten a ridiculous amount of my paycheck, though not all of it, which Malcolm later forgot when it helped his argument. I liked my job. That part matters. I worked for a commercial design firm, mostly on clinics, office spaces, small hotels, and senior living buildings. It was not glamorous. I spent a lot of time arguing about flooring, lighting, and why beige fabric chairs in a busy waiting room were basically a crime against housekeeping. But I was good at it. I liked being good at something outside my house. When Malcolm first suggested I quit, I said no. Then he suggested it again. Then we did the math. Then Simone got an ear infection the same week Erica had therapy, and Malcolm had to fly to Dallas. By Friday, I was so tired I poured orange juice into my coffee and did not notice until I took a sip. That was when the conversation became real. My mother was the one who made me insist on the agreement. She had divorced my father after 36 years of marriage. She had stayed home for most of it. One afternoon, when I told her Malcolm and I were thinking about me leaving work, she sat across from me in a little diner near her church and said, "Trust your husband." Then she buttered a biscuit. "But don't make trust your retirement plan." I told her that was a terrible thing to say. She said, "That is because you're 34. I hated that answer. I also remembered it. Malcolm did not fight me on the agreement. That was the part I kept coming back to. He did not sulk. He did not accuse me of planning for divorce. He said if putting it in writing made me feel safe, we would put it in writing. At one point, I said it felt unromantic. He said, "Cass, we are married with 3 kids and a garbage disposal that sounds like it's full of rocks. Romance has survived worse." That was Malcolm then. The man who understood. Or at least the man who wanted to. By Monday afternoon, I was starting to wonder where he had gone. That evening, Brandon called. "Hey, Mom." His voice had the careful tone adult children use when they are about to ask something they already wish they did not know. "Hi, honey. Can I ask you something?" "You just did." "Mom?" "Sorry. Go ahead." There was a pause. "Are you and Dad getting divorced?" I sat down at the kitchen table. "No." Then I heard myself and corrected it. "I don't know." That was the first time I had said it out loud. Brandon exhaled. "Dad called me." Of course he did. "He said you pulled out some old contract because of what happened at dinner." "He called it a contract?" "He said you were threatening him with it." I looked toward the hallway. Malcolm was upstairs. "I'm not threatening him." He sounded pretty upset. "I imagine he is." Brandon was quiet for a second. Then he said, "You know he didn't mean it the way it sounded." That hurt more coming from Brandon than from Malcolm. Not because Brandon was cruel, because he was trying to repair something by making it smaller. I almost started explaining. I wanted to tell him every sentence Malcolm had said, every year I had spent running the house, every choice his father and I had made together. I wanted my son to understand right away that I was right. Then I heard myself. I was about to recruit him, so I stopped. "Brandon, your father and I have an adult problem. I know. You do not need to decide who is right. I'm not. You kind of are." He sighed. I'm just saying Dad worked really hard. I know he did. That surprised him. I could hear it through the phone. I said, Your father worked very hard. That is true. It does not make the rest of the story disappear. He did not answer. You are our son, I said. Not our referee. Okay. And whatever happens between us, you do not have to pick a team. He went quiet again. Is something happening? I don't know yet. After we hung up, I sat there looking at my phone. Then I did something I should have done years earlier. I logged into our investment accounts. Or tried to. Most of our assets were where I expected. Nothing was gone. There was no secret island account, no movie nonsense, no young girlfriend buying jewelry with our retirement money. But several liquid accounts had been moved into a new structure. I could see balances. I could see statements. What I could not do was initiate certain transfers without another authorization. I checked the date. 6 weeks earlier. I stared at that screen for a long time. When Malcolm came downstairs, I turned the laptop toward him. What is this? He looked. The new account structure. I can see that. Then what's the question? Why can't I move anything? You've never moved anything. That was not my question. He folded his arms. We reorganized some things. We? Me and the advisor. 6 weeks ago. His face tightened. It was estate planning. Then why wasn't I at the estate planning meeting? You always told me to handle the investments. That stopped me for half a second, because he was right. For years, I had said that. You handle the money, I'll handle everything else. It had sounded efficient, almost funny, like we were two departments in a well-run company. Now it sounded like something I had signed away without realizing it. I closed the laptop. Handling investments is not the same as cutting me out of decisions. I didn't cut you out. You changed my access without telling me. You never use the access. That does not mean you get to take it away. Malcolm started to leave the room. I said, Were you planning to leave me? He stopped. His back stayed turned. For 1 second I thought he would say no. Instead he said, I don't know. That night I slept in the guest room for the first time in 28 years. Around 2 a.m, staring at a ceiling I had painted myself 15 years earlier, I understood something I had not wanted to understand. The agreement was not about what Malcolm said Sunday night anymore. It might be about what he had already started doing 6 weeks before he said it. The next morning, I called a lawyer of my own. Her name was Jasmine Wells. She had been recommended by a woman I used to work with years ago. I had not spoken to that woman in almost a decade, so opening with, Hi, remember me, do you know a divorce attorney? Was not exactly the reunion I had imagined. Jasmine's office was in a brick building in Worthington above a dentist and across from a coffee shop that charged $7 for drinks with flowers in them. Jasmine was around my age, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the calm manner of a woman who had watched many sensible adults temporarily lose their minds. I handed her the agreement. She read quietly for several minutes. Finally, I said, Well? She kept reading. That is usually not a good sign. It's not a bad sign either. That is very lawyerly. It's why they gave me the license. She finished the last page, set it down, and took off her glasses. This matters. I felt my shoulders loosen. Then she added, That does not mean everything here will be enforced exactly the way you may hope. There went my shoulders again. Why not? Because it is 20 years old. Assets changed, circumstances changed. Some accounts may have been retitled. Some language may be interpreted one way or another. I need more information. So it might not protect me. I did not say that. It sounded near that neighborhood. Jasmine folded her hands. Cassandra, it gives you leverage, maybe serious leverage, but do not build your emotional life on a document with staple marks. Despite myself, I smiled. So, no fairy godmother. Wrong profession. She gave me a list of things she wanted. Tax returns. Retirement statements. Mortgage records. Investment statements. Insurance policies, the recent account change documents, anything from the time I left work, old correspondence if I had any. I looked at the list. I don't know all the passwords. Jasmine gave me a look that was not judgmental, which somehow made it worse. I know, I said, and if you are listening from somewhere right now, write your city, state, or country in the comments, or tell me what time it is where you are. I always wonder where people are when they hear the moment a woman realizes the papers in the safe are not just old papers. That afternoon, I texted Malcolm. I need the login information for all retirement and investment accounts. He answered 3 minutes later. What exactly are you looking for? I typed, our money, deleted it, typed it again, our money. His answer came almost immediately. You've never cared about this stuff before. I stared at that sentence longer than I should have, because he was not entirely wrong. That was becoming an irritating pattern in my marriage. Malcolm came home around 6. I was waiting in the kitchen. I need the passwords. He put his briefcase down. Are we really doing this? Apparently I am. You've had access for years. Then giving me the passwords should not be a problem. What are you looking for? I don't know yet. That's why I'm looking. He shook his head. This is ridiculous. You changed how our accounts work without telling me. I manage the investments. You manage them. You do not own them. I never said I did. No. You just started behaving like it. He looked toward the refrigerator like food might save him. I said, the passwords, Malcolm. For a moment, I thought he would refuse. Then he gave them to me. That night, I started going through 20 years of paperwork. If you have never tried to rebuild your adult life from tax returns, I do not recommend it. Apparently, the government remembers versions of you that even your own mirror has forgotten. There I was at 32. Salary, retirement contribution, employer match. There I was at 33, making a little more. There I was at 34. And then, on paper, nothing, not nothing in real life. 3 children kept eating with great commitment. Laundry multiplied, homework appeared, doctors called, schools emailed, parents aged. But on paper, Cassandra Brooks stopped producing income. I found statements from my old 401k, an expired professional license, project photos, performance reviews, even an old business card. Cassandra Brooks, senior designer. I ran my thumb over the card. For the first hour, I thought I was collecting evidence for Malcolm. Look, see, I existed before your paycheck. Then I realized how sad that was. Malcolm already knew. I was collecting evidence for myself. A few nights later, I found something else. It was buried in old investment records from 2008 and 2009. Malcolm had once owned a brokerage account he had opened before we were married. I remembered it vaguely because he used to call it rainy day money. During the financial crisis, most of it disappeared. At first, I assumed the market had eaten it. Then I followed the transactions. Malcolm had liquidated a large part himself. The money went into our joint checking account, mortgage payments, property taxes, household expenses, tuition deposits, groceries, utilities. I sat back. In 2009, I knew things were tight. I had not known how tight. I found him in the family room watching television. Why didn't you tell me? He muted the TV. Tell you what? I handed him the statement. He looked at it and knew immediately. Oh, that was a long time ago. You emptied most of your old account. We needed it. I didn't know. You had 3 kids to worry about. We had 3 kids. He looked down at the paper. I didn't see the point in scaring you. That answer annoyed me. It also opened something. I remembered that version of Malcolm, too, the man with the knot between his shoulders, the man who woke early and checked email in bed, the man I privately resented for being distracted and short-tempered. He had been afraid, and he had carried it alone because he thought that was his job. I sat across from him. Is that when this started? When what started? You thinking everything was yours because you paid for it? His face hardened. That is not fair. Probably not. That surprised him. I meant it. It is also not fair to pretend you did not sacrifice anything. You did. He looked at me carefully. But so did I. The problem was that we had kept our sacrifices in different accounting systems. His came with statements. Mine came home from school needing braces. I went back upstairs and kept sorting, and I kept finding my own fingerprints on the mess. Early in our marriage, Malcolm had tried to involve me in investments. He would show me statements, explain funds, ask what I thought about moving money. My standard answer had been, "You handle the money, I'll handle everything else." I had said it like a joke, like we were efficient, except somewhere along the way, his department became the one that created value, and mine became the one that consumed it. That was not all Malcolm's doing. I had surrendered knowledge because it was easier. He had turned responsibility into authority because it was easier. 20 years of easier decisions had finally sent me to a divorce lawyer. 2 evenings later, I asked him the question again. This time, I did not let him walk away. He was standing at the sink. "How long?" He knew exactly what I meant. "Cass, how long have you been thinking about leaving?" He stared through the window over the sink. "A few months." "There are answers you think you are prepared for until someone actually gives them to you." I sat down. "Is there someone else?" "No." I believed him. Maybe that sounds foolish. But after 28 years, I knew how Malcolm lied. This was not it. "Then why?" He pulled out the chair across from me. For once, he did not sound angry. He sounded tired. "They reorganized my division again." "I know. 2 men I trained are above me now." I had not known that. "One of them is 38. He rubbed his hands together. "I look around the office and everybody seems younger, faster. They talk about analytics and automation and platforms like everybody was born knowing this stuff." I waited. He said, "Then I come home, and the kids call you when something is wrong." "They call both of us." "Not the same way." I knew what he meant. Erica called me when she and Eric argued. Simone called me when she was homesick. Brandon called me when he wanted advice and called Malcolm when his car made a noise. Malcolm gave a humorless little laugh. "Sometimes I feel like I am just the man everybody sends the bill to." I said nothing. And then I get angry because I think, after everything I've done, is that all I am? That was the first time I truly understood him. Not forgave him, understood him. Malcolm felt invisible too. The difference was what he had done with that feeling. "So you talked to Darius?" He nodded. 6 weeks ago. "And changed the accounts?" "I was not hiding money." "You were preparing." "I was getting organized." "For a marriage you had not told me you were thinking about ending." He did not answer. I thought about what I had been doing 6 weeks earlier. Researching Medicare supplement plans for his mother, making his colonoscopy appointment because he had ignored the reminder twice, ordering his brother's birthday gift. Buying sheets for Simone's dorm bed because she hated the ones she had. I had still been tending the machinery of our shared life. Malcolm had been asking what it would cost to dismantle it. That night, for the first time, I wondered if I actually wanted to save the marriage. That frightened me almost as much as losing it, because I still loved pieces of Malcolm. The man who slept sitting up beside Simone's hospital crib when she had pneumonia. The man who drove through freezing rain when my mother fell and broke her wrist. The man who cried at Erica's wedding and denied it though everybody saw. 28 years does not disappear because someone hurts you. That is what makes 28 years so inconvenient. The next afternoon, Erica showed up without calling. She stood in my kitchen holding 2 coffees. "I need to tell you something." I knew I was not going to enjoy the coffee. "Your father called you. After he saw his lawyer." I closed my eyes. "Did he call all of you?" "I think he was scared." "That is becoming a popular defense." "I am not defending him." She sat down. "He kept saying you would be fine, that he wasn't going to leave you with nothing." "Generous." "Mom." "What else?" Erica hesitated. "He said the house came from his income anyway." I did not speak. "He sounded angry when he said it," she added quickly, "not calculating, like he was trying to convince himself." That did not make me feel better. Maybe it made me feel worse. If Malcolm had been manipulating Erica, I could have hated the manipulation. But what if he simply believed it? Erica wrapped both hands around her cup. Mom, is the house his? I looked around the kitchen. The cabinets we chose together. The wall where we used to mark the children's height until Simone accused us of treating her like a doorframe. The refrigerator I had kept full for 20 years with groceries bought from Malcolm's paycheck and labor nobody called labor. I honestly don't know what your father thinks belongs to him anymore. Erica reached across the table and touched my hand. After she left, I went upstairs and opened my laptop. Not the investment account, not Jasmine's email. I searched my name. Then I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, Cassandra Brooks, professional experience. For the first time in 20 years, I tried to describe myself without using the words wife or mother. My resume was humiliating. Not because I had nothing to put on it, because half the things I did have sounded like artifacts from a museum called Office Life Before Wi-Fi. I spent 2 evenings trying to update it before finally calling Lena Marshall. Lena and I had worked together years ago. Back then, she could walk into a conference room with 6 contractors arguing over a floor plan and make all of them feel foolish without raising her voice. Now she owned a small design consultancy in Columbus. We met for coffee on Thursday. She read my resume for maybe 30 seconds. Then one eyebrow rose. What? She turned the page toward me. You listed fax machine proficiency. I closed my eyes. I was a technological visionary. You were terrifyingly advanced. I can remove it. I think you should frame it. That was the first real laugh I had managed in days. Then Lena became serious. Do you really want to come back? I think so. That is not an answer. I don't know what the answer is yet. She nodded. That, I believe. Lena did not give me the speech I secretly wanted. She did not say talent never fades, or that the design world had been waiting for Cassandra Brooks to return. She told me the truth. Software changed. Codes changed. Accessibility requirements changed. Clients changed. Materials changed. The way people presented work changed. And 20 years was 20 years. You can't walk back into your old job, she said. I looked down. But, she added, you can probably walk into a new one eventually. Eventually stung more than it should have. Then she told me about a senior living community her firm was redesigning. Common areas, dining rooms, visiting spaces, quiet rooms for families, a small memory care wing. I could use somebody part-time on it. I blinked. You just called me obsolete. I called you rusty. That is kinder? Also true, but you spent 20 years dealing with aging parents, small children, hospital waiting rooms, bad lighting, mobility problems, family visits, and people who refuse to admit they need brighter bulbs. Malcolm's mother thinks any lamp brighter than a candle is an attack. Exactly. The money was not much. I said yes before I could frighten myself out of it. That evening, I downloaded trial versions of 2 design programs and sat at the kitchen table watching tutorials. Malcolm came in around 7. He put his keys down and looked at my screen. What are you doing? Trying to understand why every button moved while I was gone. He stepped closer. Is that design software? Yes. Why? I looked up. Because I'm working. He seemed confused. Working where? Lena Marshall has a project. I'm helping. Lena from your old firm? She has her own company now. He pulled out the chair across from me. Since when? Since apparently quite a while. You know what I mean? Since Thursday. He stared at me. You got a job Thursday and didn't tell me. It is a project, not a job yet. Why are you doing this? That question bothered me more than it should have. Because I want to. You don't need to work. 20 years earlier, those words had sounded like safety. That night, they sounded like a hand on a door. I know. Then what are you trying to prove? I looked at him. I was about to ask you the same thing. He stood. This is exactly what I mean. Everything becomes a fight. No, Malcolm. Everything used to become me dropping it. He did not answer. I went back to the tutorial. I had to replay the same 4 minutes 3 times because I was shaking. A few days later, Brandon stopped by. He wandered around the kitchen for a while before saying what he had come to say. "Dad thinks you're going to take him apart." I put down the dish towel. "Did he say that?" "No." "Then who thinks it?" Brandon shoved his hands in his pockets. "I do." At least he was honest. "Why?" "Because he's 57, Mom. He's worked forever. If this agreement means you can take half of everything plus more—" "Stop." He stopped. "First, I do not know exactly what the agreement means. That is why I have a lawyer." He looked uncomfortable. "Second, your father worked hard." Brandon waited. I could almost see him waiting for the but. I did not give him one. "So did I." He looked away. "I know." "Do you?" "That isn't fair." "No." "What is unfair is making you responsible for deciding which parent worked harder." That landed better. He sat down. After a minute, he said, "Maya and I have been talking about marriage." I knew they were serious, but not that serious. "Okay." She said if we have kids, she doesn't ever want to fully stop working. "And that bothered you?" "No." I waited. "Maybe." "Why?" He picked at the label on a water bottle. It sounded like she was saying she wouldn't trust me. There it was. I sat across from him. Maybe she is saying she wants to trust herself too. Brandon looked at me. I did not add anything. Some lessons get worse when mothers explain them twice. Before he left, he hugged me. Not exactly an apology. Closer. Simone was less complicated. She was furious. She called me that weekend and announced, "If Dad keeps acting like this, I'm not coming home for Thanksgiving." That's ridiculous. Why? Because he's your father. He treated you like trash. He said something cruel, and we are dealing with other things. So you're defending him? No. It sounds like you are. I sighed. Simone, whatever happens between your father and me, you get to decide your relationship with him. I just did. No. You are trying to borrow my anger. She went quiet. I said, "My boundaries do not have to become yours." She did not like that. At 20, boundaries are much more satisfying when everybody else is required to have the same ones. A week later, Malcolm came to me with what he called a solution. We were sitting in the family room. He had notes. Actual notes. "We don't have to blow up our whole life," he said. I almost admired the optimism. He suggested selling the house once Simone finished the school year. We would buy something smaller, simplify the finances, stay married, and create separate personal spending accounts so neither of us felt monitored. On the surface, it was not crazy. Then he told me the monthly number he had calculated for mine. I stared at him. "How did you get that number?" "Your normal expenses." "My normal expenses." "Clothes, lunches, whatever you need." "And how much is yours?" He frowned. "Mine. Your personal account. That's different." "Why?" "Because the income comes through me." He realized it 1 second too late. Not the cruelty, the assumption. I went upstairs and brought down the agreement. There was a paragraph I had read enough times to almost know by heart. I slid it across the coffee table. "Read that." Malcolm did not want to. He did anyway. The paragraph described my unpaid domestic and caregiving contribution as material support for his earning capacity and for the accumulation of family assets. Malcolm put the page down. "You helped write that 20 years ago." "Exactly." I looked at him. 20 years ago, you understood something you have spent the last decade forgetting." For once, he did not argue. Unfortunately, neither did Jasmine when she called the next morning and ruined the fantasy I had started building around that document. She had reviewed everything in detail. There were provisions she liked. There were provisions she did not. Some assets had changed form multiple times. One support formula was less clear than I hoped. If Malcolm fought hard, litigation could become expensive and slow. How slow? Do not ask questions you do not want answered. I sat at my desk. "So after all this, I could lose. You could win some things and lose others. So could Malcolm. That sounds miserable. It often is. Then Jasmine asked me something I resented immediately. Do you want maximum leverage, Cassandra, or do you want a life? I would like both. So would everyone. That afternoon, I went to my first real meeting for Lena's project. It was awful. Not a disaster. Worse in some ways. I was simply rusty. A young designer named Morgan, who looked about 12 but was actually 26, moved through a rendering program so fast I could barely follow her. Then I referenced an accessibility standard that had changed years earlier. She corrected me politely. Very politely. Which somehow made it worse. I nodded, took notes, and pretended my soul was not leaving my body. Then we walked through the plans for the family visiting room in the memory care wing. Everyone was focused on finishes and renderings. I kept looking at the furniture layout. Something bothered me. Finally, I said, "Where does the second daughter sit?" Morgan looked at me. "What do you mean?" "This room is designed for one visitor, maybe two. But families do not arrive like renderings. One daughter sits close, another stands by the door because she is upset. Someone brings a walker, someone brings a grandchild. If the resident gets anxious, that chair blocks the calmest path out." The room went quiet. Lena leaned over the plan. "She's right." Morgan looked again. Then she said, "We can rotate the seating and shift the cabinet." "And add better light by that corner," I said. "Older eyes need contrast, not mood." Morgan smiled a little. "Mood hates you." "Mood can write me a letter." For 10 minutes, I felt useful in a way no tutorial could give me. Then Morgan opened the software and made the changes in what felt like 8 seconds, and I felt ancient again. After the meeting, I drove to a grocery store parking lot and cried, not because Malcolm had won, because I was 54 years old sitting between a cart return and a minivan, realizing how much work it would take to become competent at something I once did without thinking. My phone rang. Lena. I almost did not answer. "Hi. You left fast." "I thought I would spare everyone my public decline." "You were rusty." "Thank you. Rust is not fatal. I was hoping for something more inspirational." "Wrong friend." I laughed despite myself. Lena said, "Come back Monday." "You're sure?" "Yes. Morgan likes you." "Morgan thinks I learned drafting on cave walls." "Morgan said you caught a careflow problem no one else saw." I had not known that. "Monday," Lena said. After we hung up, I sat there for another minute. Then I called Jasmine. "I don't want a war." "All right. I don't want Malcolm destroyed. I don't want to spend 2 years proving I was allowed to exist in my own marriage." "What do you want?" For once, I knew enough to answer. "My fair share of what we built. Or retirement protection. Time to get working again, enough cash to start separate if I have to, and I want the kids kept out of the money fight." Jasmine was quiet. "That is something we can negotiate." "Set up mediation." That evening, Malcolm found me in the kitchen. Darius heard from Jasmine. "I know." He hesitated. "What are you asking for?" I looked at the man I had been married to for 28 years. "Less than you are afraid of." Relief crossed his face. Then I added, "More than you think I deserve." For the first time since Sunday dinner, I was not waiting for Malcolm to tell me what came next. Mediation was much less dramatic than television had promised. No judge, no courtroom, no one shouted objection, just 4 adults sitting around a conference table in Jasmine's office on a gray Tuesday morning with legal pads, folders, and coffee nobody finished. Malcolm sat across from me. That felt strange. For 28 years, whenever we handled something hard, mortgages, sick parents, college tuition, we sat beside each other. Now, there was a table between us. Jasmine started with practical things: the house, retirement accounts, investments, insurance, support, debts, everything a marriage becomes when lawyers need columns for it. Malcolm was tense from the start. I could tell he was waiting for Jasmine to pull out the agreement and demand every dollar she could attach an argument to. She did not. Instead, she laid out what I wanted: a fair division of marital assets, a fair share of retirement savings accumulated during the marriage, transitional support while I rebuilt earning capacity, accessible money for a separate household if the house sold, privacy that kept our children out of the financial dispute. Darius looked at me. Malcolm did too. He seemed suspicious. "You are willing to negotiate the other provisions?" Darius asked. Jasmine answered, "Some of them." Malcolm looked directly at me. "Then why are we here?" I almost laughed. "Because we are separating." "You know what I mean." Unfortunately, I did. He tapped the old agreement beside Darius. "Why drag that out if you are not going to enforce every line?" I am not the one who treated it like it was worthless. I never called it worthless. You treated it that way. He leaned back. "So this is about proving a point." "No. It sounds like it." Jasmine glanced at me, probably deciding whether to step in. I shook my head slightly. I wanted to answer. "The agreement is here because without it, you had already decided what 20 years of my life was worth." Malcolm's mouth tightened. "That is not fair." Neither was calculating an allowance for me. I was trying to find a way for us to stay married, by deciding what I needed and handing it to me every month. "That is not what I meant." Darius said, "Malcolm." Just his name, a warning. Malcolm ignored him. "I paid for this family for 28 years. The room went quiet. There it was, the sentence underneath all the other sentences. I looked at him. "No, Malcolm." He stared back. "You financed it. We built it." Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then Darius took off his glasses. "There is something else we should address." He reached into his folder. I did not know what he meant. Neither did Malcolm. Darius placed several printed pages on the table. "These are from the archived correspondence around the agreement." Then I remembered. His office had been pulling the old file. Darius turned one page toward Malcolm. "This email was yours." Malcolm looked down. I watched his eyes move across the page. His expression changed. "What is it?" I asked. Darius looked at Malcolm before answering. "The first draft offered Cassandra less protection in several areas." Malcolm objected. I thought I had misunderstood. "Malcolm objected?" Darius nodded. "He asked for revisions." Malcolm did not look up. Jasmine slid the page toward me. The email was dated 20 years earlier. It was clearly Malcolm, practical wording, direct. The way he used to write before every email needed 6 softening phrases. He had written that if I left my career, I would lose more than current salary. I would lose promotions, retirement contributions, employer matches, experience, professional contacts, and the ability to return later at the same level. Then one sentence stopped me. "She is taking the bigger risk." I read it twice. Not because I did not understand it, because I did. For weeks, I had treated the agreement as proof that I had been smart enough to protect myself. It was not only that. It was proof that Malcolm had once understood. He had known exactly what I was giving up, maybe better than I had. I looked across the table. He was still staring at the email. 20 years earlier, that man had worried I was not protected enough. Now he was sitting across from me arguing that the house came from his income. I did not feel victorious. I felt sad. Darius cleared his throat. "We should take a break." Jasmine agreed. Malcolm stood immediately. I went to the restroom, washed my hands, though they were not dirty, and stared at myself in the mirror. When I came out, Malcolm was waiting near the window at the end of the hall. "Can we talk?" I looked toward Jasmine's office. 5 minutes. We stepped into an empty conference room. Malcolm closed the door. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "I forgot about that email." I figured. I don't mean I forgot sending it. I mean I forgot thinking that way. That may be worse. He nodded. No argument. That was new. He sat down. I've been angry for a long time. At me. At me. At work. At everyone. I don't know. I waited. They keep bringing in younger people. Every reorganization, some person I trained or never heard of is suddenly above me. They talk about automation and dashboards and systems like everyone was born with this stuff. I thought about Morgan moving through design software while I sat there feeling ancient. For once, Malcolm and I were not as different as either of us wanted to believe. He continued, I spent my whole adult life thinking if I worked hard enough, I would be secure. Then I got close to 60 and realized there is no finish line. That sounds frightening. He looked surprised that I said it. It is. Then he looked at the table. And at home. He stopped. Say it. The kids come to you. They come to both of us. Not the same way. I knew what he meant. Erica called me when her marriage was hard. Simone called me when she was overwhelmed. Brandon called me when he needed advice and called Malcolm when he needed a number. Malcolm gave a humorless laugh. I started feeling like the wallet. I said nothing. Oh, then I got angry because I thought, after everything I did, is that all I am? That was the first time I truly understood the shape of his hurt. Malcolm had felt invisible. There was only one problem. You felt invisible, I said. He nodded. So you made me smaller. His head came up. I didn't. Then he stopped. I watched him search for the argument. For once, he could not find it. That is the part I cannot live with anymore, I said. He looked down. I know. We went back into mediation. We did not solve 28 years that afternoon. We did make progress over the next several weeks. The numbers moved. So did we. Malcolm agreed that litigation would cost us money we would rather keep and time we would never get back. I agreed not to chase the most aggressive interpretation of every disputed line. Neither of us got everything. That was probably how I knew the settlement was real. The house would be sold. I would receive retirement assets and transitional support that gave me time to rebuild my career without panicking over every grocery bill. Malcolm would still have a reasonable retirement, just not the one he had imagined. Neither would I. One evening, after a counseling session we had agreed to try, Malcolm walked with me to my car. Do you think this is it? He asked. The marriage? He nodded. I don't know. We could stop the separation. I looked at him. There was a time when that sentence would have been all I needed. I'm willing to keep going to counseling. Hope crossed his face. But I am not stopping the separation. It disappeared. Why? Because if we ever choose each other again, I need to know I'm choosing you. He frowned. I don't understand. I cannot spend another 20 years wondering whether I stayed because leaving was financially impossible. He looked away. I said, if I come back, Malcolm, I want it to be because I want you. Not because you are the only life I can afford. He did not like hearing it, but he understood. Brandon came by the following weekend. He stood in the kitchen while I wrapped glasses in newspaper for the eventual move. I owe you an apology. I handed him a sheet. Wrap. He started rapping. For what? I thought you were trying to punish Dad. I was angry enough to consider it. He looked at me. Really? I'm your mother, Brandon, not a saint. He laughed. Then he became serious. Maya and I talked again. About her working? He nodded. I think I took it personally because I thought if she needed her own money, she expected me to fail her. And now? Now I think maybe that is not what she was saying. I wrapped another glass. Maybe she wants to trust herself too. He smiled. You already used that line. It was good the first time. A few months later, Lena called me into her office. The senior living project was almost finished. I had gotten faster, not Morgan fast. Morgan used software like she had a private agreement with the computer, but I could hold my own. Lena handed me a folder. We would like to keep you. I stared at her. 3 days a week, she said. Permanent. The salary was modest. Very modest. I said yes. My first direct deposit hit the following Friday. I was sitting at my desk when the notification appeared on my phone. I looked at the number, then I started laughing. Morgan looked over the divider. "Everything okay?" "Yes." I held up my phone. Apparently, I earned $1. She had no idea why that was funny. I did not explain. That evening, my phone rang while I was making dinner. Malcolm. By then, most of our conversations involved the house, attorneys, counseling, or paperwork. I answered. "Hi. Erica told me about the job." "Of course she did." "Congratulations." "Thank you." There was a pause. Then Malcolm said, "I'm proud of you." I stood there with a wooden spoon in my hand. A few months earlier, those words would have meant almost everything. That night, they still meant something. Just not what they used to. That might have been the biggest change of all. By the time the house sold, I had learned 3 things. First, a family can fit an unbelievable amount of junk into a 4-bedroom house if given 20 years and a basement. Second, nobody wants Christmas decorations until you threaten to donate them. Third, starting over at 54 is much less glamorous than people make it sound. I was working 3 days a week for Lena and taking courses to update my certifications. I was getting better slowly. There were still days when Morgan moved through a rendering program so fast I wanted to unplug her computer to make the world fair. Once, after pretending for 15 minutes that I understood a new tool, I finally rolled my chair to her desk. "Can you show me how you did that?" She looked surprised. "Sure. I should warn you. I learned drafting when rulers were involved." She laughed. 20 minutes later, she had taught me 3 shortcuts. That was another thing I had to relearn. At 34, asking a younger coworker for help would have embarrassed me. At 54, dignity had become less useful than the help button. The house closed in early fall. The weekend before we turned over the keys, all 3 children came home to clean out their rooms. Erica arrived with boxes and labels. Simone arrived with opinions. Brandon arrived 20 minutes late and immediately asked if there was food. So childhood resumed. We found old Halloween costumes, school projects, trophies, stuffed animals, and hundreds of printed photos from the era when people developed every picture whether anyone's eyes were open or not. Simone found a ceramic turtle she made in 3rd grade. "Why did you keep this?" "Because you made it. It has 7 legs. You were creative." I was bad at turtles. She put it in the keep box anyway. Malcolm was there too. That was strange at first, but there was so much work to do that eventually we stopped acting like a family undergoing a legal separation and started acting like 5 people trying to empty a basement before Sunday night. At one point, Brandon tried to assemble a storage shelf Erica wanted to take home. He spent 40 minutes on it, then announced the manufacturer had clearly failed to include a critical support part. I walked over. The missing bolt was under his knee. I pointed. He looked down. "That is not the problem." "Financial services, huh?" "This is engineering." Apparently, poorly regulated engineering. Even Malcolm laughed. For a few seconds, everybody did. I looked around the room. Erica sitting cross-legged on the floor. Simone holding her strange turtle. Brandon arguing with a shelf. Malcolm laughing despite himself. This was still my family. It just was not going to have the same shape anymore. Erica had started talking normally with her father again, though a little distance remained. Brandon understood more than he had at the beginning. Simone had the hardest time. That afternoon, she followed me into the kitchen. "Do you think you and Dad will get back together?" "I don't know." "You always say that." "Because I still don't know." "But do you want to?" I leaned against the counter. "Some days." She looked hopeful. "Other days I don't." The hope dimmed. "Mom, I'm not going to lie to make you feel better." She folded her arms. "So we are just supposed to wait? To find out what happens?" I smiled a little. "Welcome to adulthood." She did not appreciate that. Then I said, "Not knowing is not the same as everything being wrong, Simone." She looked toward the family room, where Malcolm and Brandon were arguing about whether an old television was worth saving. "I hate this." I know. A year earlier, I would have tried to fix that feeling for her. I would have promised things I could not promise. Instead, I hugged her and let her hate it. By Sunday evening, the house was almost empty. The children left one by one. Malcolm and I stayed behind to finish. Near sunset, he found me on the back steps. He sat beside me. For a minute, we looked at the yard. Birthday parties, graduation cookouts, one terrible attempt at a vegetable garden, a patch of grass where Brandon once broke a sprinkler head and blamed water pressure. Malcolm reached into his pocket. "I found this behind the bottom drawer of your old desk." He handed me a business card. The corners were bent. Cassandra Brooks, senior designer. I laughed. "Look at that font." He looked at it too. "I forgot this version of you." I turned the card over in my fingers. "So did I." He nodded. Then he said, "I'm sorry." I waited. There was no second half. No explanation about work. No speech about pressure. No reminder that he had sacrificed too. Just, "I was cruel to you." That mattered. "I know." He looked out at the yard. Counseling has made me realize I spent a lot of years thinking responsibility meant ownership. That was probably the most honest thing he had said since this started. Then he asked, "Do you think we will ever live together again?" I looked at him. Months earlier, I would have thought I owed him an answer. Now I knew better. "I don't know." He nodded. This time he did not push. We were still going to counseling separately and sometimes together. Maybe we would reconcile. Maybe we would divorce. I had stopped treating either outcome as proof that the previous 28 years were a success or a failure. Life is rarely that tidy. A marriage can hold love and resentment at the same time. Two people can sacrifice for each other and still wound each other. You can forgive someone without trusting him with the same parts of yourself right away. My new place was a 2-bedroom townhouse 15 minutes away. Nothing fancy, a small patio, good light, a kitchen with about 6 inches less counter space than civilization requires. The kids helped me move. Brandon assembled a bookshelf incorrectly again. I began to think Maya should insist on a prenuptial agreement specifically covering furniture. That first evening, after everyone left, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The silence felt different from the guest room in the old house. That silence had felt like something was missing. This silence felt unclaimed. My laptop was open. Another paycheck had deposited that morning. On impulse, I printed the pay stub. I stood there holding it and thought about the safe. The old agreement was in a file box upstairs. For 1 second, I considered putting the pay stub beside it. It seemed appropriate. Then I changed my mind. I put the pay stub on the refrigerator with a magnet. The agreement belonged to a time when I needed proof that somebody else understood what I was giving up. The paycheck belonged to what came next. And no, earning money again did not suddenly make me more valuable. That was the whole point. Malcolm's sentence at dinner had been ridiculous on its face. I had earned money before I stayed home. I earned money now. But that was not why it hurt. It hurt because he took one kind of contribution, the kind with numbers attached, and made it the only kind that counted. And if I was being honest, I had made my own mistake too. I let "Malcolm handles the money" become an excuse not to understand our finances. We divided the work. Then, slowly, we divided the knowledge. Eventually, we were living inside 2 different versions of the same marriage. The agreement helped correct the financial part. It did not fix me. Neither did the settlement. Neither did the paycheck on my refrigerator. What changed me were smaller things. Asking questions I used to avoid, admitting when I did not know something, going back to work even when I felt old beside Morgan, letting my children love their father without making them defend me, not using every bit of leverage I had just because I was angry, and not going back to Malcolm simply because 28 years made leaving frightening. 20 years ago, I thought that agreement was there in case my husband ever stopped loving me. I understand it differently now. It was there because 2 younger people once understood that love does not cancel risk. Somewhere along the way, Malcolm forgot what I had given up, and if I am being fair, I forgot pieces of myself too. The agreement reminded him. Starting over reminded me. My first paycheck did not make me valuable. Neither did the house, the retirement account, or 20-year-old legal language with our signatures at the bottom. Those things mattered, but they were not the point. The point was that, for the first time in a very long time, I was not waiting for somebody else to tell me what my life counted for. So yes, these days I earn a paycheck again. It is smaller than the one Malcolm brought home, much smaller, but every time it arrives, I smile. Not because it proves I finally have value, because I finally understand that I always did. If this story made you think of someone whose work has been quietly ignored, tell me how you learned to value what nobody paid you for. And if it stayed with you, like and subscribe, because no one should have to produce a pay stub to prove their life mattered.